welcome back to the Pick Six Podcast Show. Will Brinson, John Breach, and the pinnacle power ranker himself, Pete Prisco. Probably should have thought of all these alliterative phrases before we fired up the show, but just spontaneously podcast just broke out. Pop-up podcast. Anywho, back to the power rankings. These are the post-draft power rankings. And so, Pete, your last power rankings before, a lot of P's here. Your last power rankings before these post-draft power rankings were immediately following the season. The Jets, not a very good football team with no Aaron Rodgers, finished at 26. They have leapt all the way up to 11th in your power rankings. Is that more a byproduct of Aaron Rodgers getting healthy, or you liking what they did this offseason?
Well, it's not so much a leap because this is a brand new look ahead to the power rankings. Those power rankings are kind of based on last year, and this is looking ahead to this year. So it's not like they took a big leap based on what they did. It's just that you had Aaron Rodgers back, and they weren't a very good team last year with Zach Wilson and that gang trying to play quarterback. So, and getting Rodgers back is enormous. And we don't know where he is. Everybody talked about him being back at the end of last season and where would he be if he came back, if they were making a playoff run. Even now, you have no idea where he is as a quarterback. You'd like to think he's going to be all the way back, but he's 40. It's tough to come back from, an injury at that age, even as good as it's been and medicine has been lately. It's still tough to do. But I think he's going to be close to being the same Aaron Rodgers. And if he is, it's a major upgrade for an offense that needed it. And so the question becomes, are they good enough on the offensive line? And they added Tyron Smith. They added Morgan Moses. Then they drafted Fashanu, the tackle out of Penn State. They're going to be better. No matter who's playing, they're going to be significantly better on the offensive line. So add that all together. They're an improved team. Now the question becomes, does the pressure on Robert Saleh, does the pressure on that organization, does the pressure on Aaron Rodgers impact how they play? I think if everybody stays healthy, Will, and Rodgers stays healthy, they have a chance to not only push for that division title, but push for a lot more.
Pete, I'm glad you said if everyone stays healthy, because right now it feels like this team is being held together by Scotch tape. You look at Mike Williams, he's coming off the ACL tear. You look at Tyron Smith, he's missed 17 games over the past 2 seasons. Obviously, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers with the Achilles. And I know Morgan Moses, John Simpson, but both of those guys came from Baltimore. It's like the Ravens decided they would rather not have an offensive line than have those two guys, and they just gave them to the Jets. So, the Jets have kind of these treadbacks from the Ravens. So are you concerned at all about all the injuries, not just Rodgers, and the fact that these offensive linemen, look, teams don't usually let good offensive linemen go, and all of these guys were kind of let go in free agency, or in Morgan Moses' case, was traded away. So none of that's a concern?
Oh, it's a concern. I mean, anytime you're trying to put together a new offensive line, it's always a concern. I mean, offensive line play in the NFL is awful across the board. There's few teams have good offensive lines. And you look at part of the reason you don't get to hit anymore, so you get no continuity. You come out of college, you're passing and tapping, you're not really run blocking, so you get none of that. And it takes time to work in pads for 5 guys to come together. And now you're bringing these guys all together and trying to ask them to protect Rodgers and run the football with Hall. That's a tough task. I don't care who's on the field. So, to answer your question, the offensive line is an issue no matter who's in front of them, and it's even more so when you do have those injury questions.
And not to mention, they got a pretty tough division, right? I mean, you got the Bills, you got the Dolphins, who were very good last year, and then the Patriots, who frankly can't be worse on offense after dumping 7 of 8 picks onto that side of the ball. A tougher division, though, the AFC West, features a team I want to pick to go deep into the playoffs, a team that I want to pick to do some weird stuff in the postseason, simply because I believe that Jim Harbaugh wins wherever he goes. And despite people's concerns about Mike Williams leaving, Jets, by the way, Keenan Allen being traded, and the Chargers not using their first pick on a wide receiver, instead getting a tackle, the best tackle in the draft, Joe Alt, and now they have 2 stud potential all-pro style tackles. This is Harbaugh ball, baby, and you bumped him only up to 18, Pete? What are you doing here? 18? This team's better than 18. It's a playoff team.
No, they're not a playoff team. I'm with you that Harbaugh will win. It just will happen next year. I think this is kind of the feeling out year. You talk about Alt. They drafted Alt, which getting an offensive lineman is the right thing to do, by the way. I would draft an offensive lineman for the exact reasons I just laid out there for you. If you get two good ones, you've solidified your group pretty much. They still got to work together. But when you look at Alt, you're talking about a guy going from the left side to the right side. And he's 6'9". I mean, he's a big man. He's got to have to adjust to playing. He's got to have to adjust. Although, I will say this. When they asked Harbaugh about it after the draft, he wouldn't say it right away. And they pressed him, Who's going to play left tackle? Who's going to play left tackle? And they pressed him, and finally he said, well, Rashawn Slater will start at left tackle. But he wouldn't commit to that right away. So Slater looks, I'll be honest with you, Slater looks more like a right tackle than Alt does. So they're going to have an interesting decision there. But why would you move a guy who's been an All-Pro at left tackle from that spot to move him to the right side? I don't think you do. They're going to be physical. They're going to run the ball. That's what Greg Roman wants to do. That's what Harbaugh wants to do. I just think they're going to have to figure out the dynamic with Herbert. You know, does he turn Herbert into J.J. McCarthy? Because you can't have it both ways. When J.J. McCarthy was at Michigan, everybody said, oh, well, they held him back, they ran the ball, and J.J. McCarthy didn't get to show what he could do. Well, if he goes to the Chargers and he does that, are you hurting your team or are you helping your team if you hold Justin Herbert back? So I want to see how it works out this year before they will, by the way, he's too good a football coach, they will take the step forward.
Well, you look at Justin Herbert, and they're going to have to run the ball because they don't have any receivers. I mean, look, maybe Ladd McConkey ends up being the next Jerry Rice.
McConkey, baby!
Well, maybe he ends up being the next Jerry Rice. But right now, he's a rookie receiver. He's next to Quentin Johnson and Joshua Palmer. I mean, Justin Herbert doesn't have any proven guys to throw to, which seems like a huge issue. And again, it's not like you have them in your top 10, Pete. You have them in the bottom half. It's sprinted over here with all the playoff talk. But do you think these guys can develop, or do you think Harbaugh is basically forcing himself and forcing Greg Roman to embrace a run-first offense?
Well, you can't give up on a second-year receiver after he struggles as a rookie either. I mean, that's too soon. You got to give him another year. So I think Johnson you have to give this year. You know, McConkey's going to be a good player. I mean, he is. He's going to be a good NFL receiver for a long time. But again, what's the philosophy? I think, you know, you can talk all you want about the receivers and throwing the ball and Herbert's deep balls and his passing and everything else. But what they want to do is run the ball. That's what they want to do. And so I want to see the dynamic when you have Herbert and that arm and you have a lot of run calls plays. I think that's going to be a problem for them as they kind of work their way through it this year, which is why I'm not as bullish on the Chargers as Brinson is. But you know how Brinson works, Breach. He's got to make some outlandish statement in April so that when it happens, if it happens, then he can claim it, even though he backed away from it 4 or 5 times in the course leading up to the season.
Classic Brinson.
Look, you're not wrong. That is classic Brinson. I will say I have no interest in. I'm not get this tattooed on my right arm. I will not let myself be talked into picking the Chargers to win this division. The Chiefs are going to win this division every year for the next decade. I do think the wide receiver thing is overblown. And 2 words for you if you're worried about Justin Herbert: Andrew Luck. Threw like 27 times a game max at Stanford, and he was just fine. Speaking of quarterbacks that we have concerns about, Joe Burrow. Can this guy start a season healthy for once in his freaking career? I mean, my God, even his rookie year when he was healthy, he had to deal with a pandemic and not having the playbook because of a weird season. Do you think the Bengals, who were 17 when the season ended, great job by them, like trying to figure something out without Burrow, all the way up to 7 now? Is this the Bengals' year, Pete? We're sort of closing in on you needing them to win the Super Bowl for you to be correct in your draft night prediction. Speaking of April bombast.
Well, if they had blocked Aaron Donald in the last play of the game in the Super Bowl against the Rams, they would have won one already. But they couldn't block them, and needless to say, Jamar Chase was wide open down the sideline, and they couldn't get him the football. So they didn't win it, so I still have a ways to go. I got 5 more years to get my prediction of the Bengals winning one after they picked him, and I still think it's going to happen. He's too good a player, but you're right, he's got to stay on the field. You look at their offense, he's got to be on the field or they're a totally different team. We know that. There's certain guys in this league, well, you got to have a good backup. I don't care who your backup is. If your starter's out, you're done. If he's out for any length of time, you're done. And that's the way Joe Burrow is. But offensive line's been an issue for him. I think they addressed it in the draft. And they got 3 of the biggest tackles. Those guys could start on an NBA team. They're all 6'8". They're big tackles. So their line will be better. He just has to stay on the field.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, Pete. Look, Joe Burrow misses those 7 games. The Bengals played arguably the toughest schedule, and they still had a winning record, still went 9-8. So if you're a Bengals fan, that is why you are optimistic about 2024. But look, he's one more injury away from getting the injury-prone label. I mean, we saw the ACL, obviously, and the wrist, but let's not forget about missing all of training camp with the calf issue. So if these injuries keep piling up, they're going to become a concern. I think right now it's definitely in the back of your mind if you're the Bengals that, hey, look, Joe's having trouble staying on the field. And if it happens again this training camp or early next season, that's when you're in trouble and you have to start thinking forward. And I would say the other thing with the Bengals is the defense. The Joe Burrow injury kind of overshadowed the fact that this defense gave up more yardage than any other team in the AFC, the second most in the NFL. So they're going to have to get that right. And, they made some moves on the defensive line, added Sheldon Rankins, picked up a couple guys in the draft. So I do think they should be better. But that's absolutely the other concern besides Joe Burrow's health.